Good evening and welcome to The Core. Coming to you live from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. I am Kadria Ahmed. Transparency International ranks Nigeria 144 out of 186 countries on the corruption index, meaning the country is among the most corrupt in the world. 6.7 trillion naira is stolen annually from Nigeria through private sector corruption, tax evasion, and illegal transfers of funds abroad. This is according to a high-level panel on illicit flows out of Africa, which was led by former South African President Thabo Mbeki. This stolen amount is roughly 1 trillion naira more than Nigeria made from oil revenues in 2018. Undoubtedly, Nigeria is facing a crisis of accountability in the public sector. A lack of transparency, corruption, and impunity are the three legs upon which this problem stands. The consequences of this major failure are real and immediate, from an almost non-existent public healthcare system to roads that are death traps to a public education system that is on the brink of collapse. Nigerians daily are paying a very high price for this lack of accountability in the public sector. Those that can afford it have essentially become their own government, providing for themselves electricity, water, and in recent times, even security. How did we get here, despite having laws and institutions that are designed to enforce accountability? This and many more questions on today's edition of The Core. But first, here's an overview of the problem.
I, Olusegun Obasanjo,
do solemnly swear.
One of the hopes many Nigerians held upon her return to democracy 20 years ago was that corruption and impunity will be on the down low, if not totally eradicated, and accountability enthroned as one of the pillars of governance. The thinking is that if government is of the people, by the people, and for the people, then surely it must be more accountable and transparent in nature.
We shall be firm with them. There will be no sacred cows.
Fast forward 2 decades down the line, there is a lot left to be desired. Corruption with attendant poverty are rife, as Nigeria ranks very poorly on the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, which tracks public sector corruption and ranks countries from all over the globe. The reasons might not be far-fetched. According to Patricia Moreira, Managing Director of Transparency International, corruption chips away at democracy to produce a vicious cycle where corruption undermines democratic institutions, and in turn, weak institutions are less able to control corruption. And that's what Nigeria still grapples with: weak institutions. Analysts say some of the agencies created by the government to facilitate development have become patronage for political loyalty and conduit pipes for corruption in the society. Take, for instance, the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, which is empowered under Section 85 of the Nigerian Constitution to have access to all the books, records, returns, and other documents relating to those accounts. This is what a lawmaker says currently happens.
Out of 491, only 47 have audited the account of 2015. So 2016 is still outstanding. So as we speak, if we have to follow the 491 of them have fallen short. 85 of them that you saw on that list since their inception. EFCC came into existence in 2001. All right? Since their inception, they have never audited their accounts.
It gets even worse, where government agencies who have the responsibility to bring offenders to book have a problem complying with the laws themselves.
So you can see the agencies even fighting corruption in our domain. They themselves fall short of the law, establishing them. Because the law, establishing FCC and all such like, the law says that within 6 months into the new year, you account for the following year, the preceding year, you must have been audited. And it must have been sent to the Attorney General. And they have not been doing it.
The National Assembly has oversight functions for the executive and also has a statutory public accounts committee, which is empowered by the Constitution to look into audited accounts.
Come to think of it, we don't enforce these laws. Even this bill that has been passed, the new federal audit bill that were passed, where we found out that in the existing law, that is the law that was put in place in 1956, that has been there up till now, that there are no penalties for failures, okay, or for breaches, in the submission of audited accounts. But now we are seeing it. If tomorrow that this bill is passed into law, just like we have exposed them, who is now supposed to talk to them? Is it not the executive?
With government agencies struggling with capacity problems, whether forced or inherent, there is certainly a need for strengthening of agencies. In the meantime, the citizenry yearn for good governance, probity and accountability, and there is a role for civil society, which they've taken up. The question is whether they've been able to gather enough momentum to bring about the needed change.
To discuss these issues, I'm joined by Mr. Gabriel Okeowu, the General Manager with Budget, a non-governmental organization focused on accountability. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Mr. Chuman Nwokolo is a lawyer and publisher and also writer of Nigeria's Bribe Code, a new law designed to bring an end to corruption. At least he hopes so. Thank you so much, sir, for coming.
Thank you.
Mrs. Habiba Balogun is a lawyer and the co-convener of Bring Back Our Girls Lagos, and she joins us today. She's an active citizen. Yeah. Thank you for coming. And finally, Mr. Soji Apampa, who's the co-founder of Convention on Business Integrity. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We also have a distinguished studio audience who will join the conversation. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. All right, now, there are those of you at home who would like to take part in this conversation, and you can send your comments using the hashtag #NGTheCore to Channel's Twitter handle @ChannelsTV and my own Twitter handle @Gadria Ahmed. Now, Mr. Nwokolo, our assumption is that democracy should equal accountability, which should translate to good governance. That seems to be sort of the general principle about democracy in most places. Why is it not the case in Nigeria?
Because democracy comes with culture. We have to grow a culture to know how to actually apply all that comes with it. And unfortunately, this is not just with Nigeria, but all over the world. Institution also comes with institution capture. So it is not possible simply by creating the institutions to achieve good governance. You also, in addition, have to create a system whereby all of it work together to create what we want.
Now, let me bring Gabriel in here because you're used to sort of scrutinizing institutions and system. We hear people say you have to create a culture. It's a kind of a very nebulous term. From the work that you do, what are the challenges of the institutions that we have that are supposedly supposed to hold people accountable and encourage accountability, and why are they not working?
So I will approach it from the perspective of immaturity in democracy. Because if you look at the systems and the processes of democracy, is such that should balance itself out in terms of accountability. If it is what it's supposed to be, the government of the people, by the people. But what we have seen is different ambition, not just the understanding of what it should be, is driving who occupies the institutions. Yes, all the institutions we are supposed to have in a democratic setting, we do have the executive.
So why are they not working? So I mean, it's easy to talk about culture, but I want us to be quite specific about what the issues are. How does this lack of culture translate and, for example, impact the work of, say, ICPC, EFCC, the judiciary, the police, all of those things?
The motivation in the people that occupies those institutions. The motivations are wrong, the ambitions are wrong. It is not to serve. If the right motivations, if the right motivations are there, right, which is to serve the people, to represent the people, we will have a system that is running. But what we have today is not what it's supposed to be, because everybody wants to get into those institutions that have been laid out without the right motivations to occupy those seats.
Mr. Pampa, what are your thoughts on the challenges that we face with the institutions that are supposed to be holding public office holders as well as public agencies, ministries to account?
We should start by looking at the power relationship between, say, the office of the president and these other institutions. We should also look at how the leaders for each of those institutions emerge and how much influence the president and other influential politicians are able to have on the process of emergence of those leaders. Right. And you find out that in the end, what Mr. Okewu is trying to say is that they're beholden to the parties that have nominated them and brought them forward. And it's as though there's a silent code that the purpose in which you're brought there is to look after my interests, not necessarily the public interest.
Right.
And yes, so we've not been able to focus that strongly. There seems to be too much power in the hands of those who take those decisions.
Okay, but while that is correct, Habiba, the truth is also that we don't necessarily always see these institutions also successfully prosecuting people who might not necessarily be in power, but who are actually not, you know, being accountable in the positions they hold. And here I'm thinking about even regular policemen on the streets, for example, or, you know, a secondary school teacher who's been paid by the state government to sort of teach students, that sort of thing. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to go back to what you said about culture. So culture is the way we do things around here. Okay? So in democracies, there's a way we should be doing things. And in Nigeria since 1980 to now, to date, there's a way we do things. And there's a big onus on the citizen, whether it's an active citizen or not. For the citizen, the way we do things in Nigeria is the way that will make my life easy, the way I can get things done, the way that I won't run into problems. If they felt the way they could get things done was to hold a public officer to account, they would do it. And you have instances, I'm glad you mentioned the police, because the police is one institution where the citizens actually hold the police to account more than any other. And when the citizens go up and say, I'm reporting you or so on, the institution has no choice but to self-correct and self-regulate. The police is one of the most institutions that is most responsive, actually, in terms of accountability. Or do you disagree with me? Okay? It's just that the citizens don't feel they can do the same things with other institutions. They don't understand. So you're talking about immaturity. They don't understand that they're really there to serve us. What are these people really supposed to do? And that boils down to, again, that you said our educational system is at the brink of collapse. Dictators have used illiteracy for a long time to keep populations suppressed. So I think that lack of understanding has caused the citizens not to have the culture of demanding accountability for themselves, selfishly, not even for their nation. And once we get more of that happening, I think we'll see something shift. Okay,
so we've identified issues of the way people who run these places are appointed, the issue of the way regular citizens think and, you know, how they perceive these institutions. In terms of the work that you do specifically, using budgets, you know, what is supposed to be public budgets to look at the work of state governments and agencies, etc., etc., are there any specific things that you've noticed in the course of carrying out your duties that make these institutions unable to fully function the way they're supposed to?
So if I look back to when some 8-7 years ago, and that is some 10 years into this current broken 20 years democracy that we have run, those are periods where there is a gap between what government is doing and the people. And it is not necessarily because the government wants to be want to have opacity around what they are doing, but also because there is no interest on the part of the people to relate with what government is doing. And that gap was what we came into to bridge in. So some 8 years ago, is government public data, public finance data available? Yes, it was available, but was it accessible and understandable for ordinary citizens? No. And so we came in first there to first of all bring light into what government is making, what government is generating through transparency. Let it be open. Let everybody know what plans you have for me, what plan you have for our community, what plan you have for our state. So that was like the first thing. So the first is to make it simplified, make it simple in such a way that ordinary person, irrespective of their literacy capacity, can understand, if not in figures, in graphs, if not in graphs, in images, can understand or have a bit of understanding of what government is planning to do. Another is now to motivate the people, support, educate the people to be able to use this information they now have to engage. Yeah. And I'm sorry to say that we appear to still be stuck there, because now the informations are available, the information is out there, but the part of engagement is still not so
So when
well.
you say information is out there, I'm assuming you're specifically talking about budgetary.
So if we look at budgetary information,
okay, that is available. Would we
at
say
the federal
that
level, by the
generally,
way,
Mr. Mokolo, I mean, we kind of all, I think, can agree that transparency is sort of a pillar of accountability, and it's very difficult to have accountability without it. Are we satisfied with sort of the level of transparency that we see in the public sector at the moment?
What budget is doing is fantastic, but you have to agree with me that this is supposed to be the rule of government in the first place. Yes. In a functioning system, they should be transparent with everything they do. Yeah. Motivation should also be part of government work. Yeah. You know, so the question is, why are we not there? And that is where the work of bribe code comes in. If you're looking at creating a system that makes NGOs irrelevant, in a perfect system there should be no NGOs. True. The health sector should be all-encompassing. So how do we get to that stage where every department of government is working perfectly? And that is where bribe code comes in.
Yes, and we will come and talk about bribe code, but I want us to focus a little bit more about the institutions and some of the issues, because if you think in terms of EFCC, if you think in terms of ICPC, if you think in terms of the Conduct Bureau, if you think in terms of our police, our judiciary, the National Assembly, to a certain extent, all of them are supposed to have some sort of oversight function that is supposed to entrench accountability. And
the reason, in my opinion,
yes,
the reason why they don't work the way they should is once you get into these positions, you immediately become part of the system that is broken, whether you like it or not. And so once you sit on that chair, there is something on that chair. I think it was Abati who was talking about the demons in the seats.
Okay, so I mean, in the video that we heard earlier, we heard a lawmaker saying, for example, the Auditor General, by law, is supposed to receive audited accounts from agencies, from ministries, and many, including some of the ones charged with looking after these particular issues, are not actually submitting their documentation. Fundamentally, Mr. Ababa, I mean, that sounds like people are saying we don't care and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, it's the culture of impunity, because there isn't any consequence management. Yes. Because why should the office of the vice president say that there should be no trucks on the bridges in Lagos, and for a long time there was no response? And I also didn't see the consequence that came to them. Before we had it reissued again recently around the swearing in, yes, the inauguration. So again, there was no consequence. And so once people weigh it up, that if I do it, doesn't matter. If I don't do it, doesn't matter. Where do I get my benefit from from not doing it, and I won't do it.
Okay, we're going to have to take a quick break. Please don't go away. Welcome back. You are watching The Core, and we're talking about accountability in public office. Remember, if you want to be a part of this conversation, you can join the conversation on our social media handles. On Twitter at Channels TV or at Adria Ahmed, YouTube at Channels Web using the hashtag #NGTheCore. You can also follow us on Facebook at Channels Forum. Now, Ms. Abampa, often when we talk about accountability in the public sector, there is a lot of scrutiny, rightfully so, on people who are in positions that are public office, if you like, from those who are elected to those appointed, etc., etc. But can we have a lack of accountability in public office if we had an accountable private sector?
That's at the core of the problem, because they're two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. And the truth is, in order to have the private sector develop the economy in the way it should happen, following the rules and regulations laid down by the public sector, you're going to need that level of accountability between them. But the problem comes when the lines are blurred, when the same party who you think is the regulator is actually making regulation for a special interest, not really the public interest. And these distortions, and sometimes even in the personal interest, it's these distortions that make it very difficult to have a level playing field and for the rest of the actors to actually blow the whistle. Because who do you blow the whistle to if the offender is actually the regulator? So those kinds of problems make it very, very difficult for one to hold the other accountable between the private and public sector.
Now, they are citizens, these people in the private sector, and just like the average Nigerian, generally they suffer from similar issues. So they're wealthy, maybe, but they still have to get a generator. They have big trucks that they drive, but the potholes in front of their houses. I mean, we have, for example, in a place like Lagos, real estate costing millions of dollars, but actually with potholes right in front of it. And so from the point of view of the citizen, it doesn't seem like enlightened self-interest. What are your views regarding why people would continue to do this?
Wow. Okay, so just so we stick to specifics.
Yes.
There are several things. The first one is that people in general, I engage a lot with people. I engage with local government. I engage with all the regulators at my level. When I have a problem, I write them a letter and they respond. I've never had a situation where they have not responded. But when it comes to you want to fix the road in front of your house, the pothole, you're a rich man. You want to fix Falmouth Barracks. I don't know how many institutions that I personally am aware of who have gone to the police and said, let us renovate Falmouth Barracks for your own officers. And they've been told, no, it's our job to keep the barracks renovated. You have to give us the money. And they turn down the money if the private sector party is not prepared to give it to them instead of carrying out the work. So you have instances, many instances of people who want to repair their road, and the local government is telling them, no, you have to give us the money and then we'll repair your road. You give them the money, they go and repair the road of their party chieftain or something like that. And then you have private sector people going ahead and repairing their roads on Sunday, so that by Monday it will be too late for anybody to stop them. How many people can do that? These are the people who have money. How many Nigerians have the money to intervene like that?
Yeah, but let me bring Mr. Nwokulu.
So the enlightened self-interest is there, but it's blocked. Very often it is blocked.
No, but we're talking here about the role that the private sector actually plays in enabling a lack of accountability of people who are in public office. And so I am just, because for example, Falana, the lawyers, you know, the famous lawyer, recently went to court trying to compel the federal government to recover about 40 million that was due to it that had not been paid. But the culprits were not just NNPC. They were also private oil and gas companies. So again, the question I asked him, is it realistic to expect that we can fix the problems in the public sector around accountability if we do not tackle the issues in the private sector? Because many say they are the major enablers. Is that correct, or are we being too hard on them?
In my opinion, it's impossible to fix any system in isolation. It must be done as a system. If you fix the private sector, the private sector will not succeed unless this private sector is also sorted out at the same time. That's my opinion.
And you have a plan for doing that, don't
I do.
you? Okay, so tell us about this plan.
What it is, simply, it's a very simple plan. It does three main things. Right now, the reason why things don't work are the people who are supposed to make them work are the ones that are actually the major criminals. So in order to make it work, we have to do three main things. Fortunately, the government has picked up one, which is whistleblower protection and reward. So with all the problems in that we have identified and we have pointed it out in writing, it's still the first stage, which means you pay the whistleblower. So far, almost 8 billion naira has been recovered in addition to almost $400 million. And that's the first step. It must be done. It has been done. But it will not work unless two other things are done. The second one is we must change the penalty for serious corruption. We must, for instance, the penalty we recommend is that for every company that engages in serious corruption, if it is found guilty and it has exhausted its appeal process, it is liquidated. If it is a private company, it's liquidated. If it's a public company, other remedies, the main shareholders who control the board are expropriated, but the company continues as usual. Okay,
so sounds like a really good way of making corruption unprofitable long term. But again, don't we come back to the same problem? Because we're going to rely on the courts.
No, let me wrap up with the third point. The third point is the most important. That is universal prosecution. Right now, any prosecution in Nigeria conducted by the federal government can be ended by one man say so, the Attorney General. It's called a nolle prosequi. Now, under the bribe code provisions, 37 Attorney Generals in Nigeria can prosecute any serious corruption. If that is done, it means that there's no hiding place for serious corruption. So, which means that if you are guilty, you will be prosecuted. First, you'll be found out, there's a private sector. Secondly, you will be prosecuted because there's competitive prosecution. Any state government that successfully prosecutes you gets to keep your penalties. Don't forget that with Halliburton, America keeps $579 million of penalties for Nigerian corruption. So $3 billion naira corruption is our money. It's not in the American coffers. So we can domicile this in Nigeria by the bribe code.
Okay, we'll come back and discuss a little bit more about this, but I want to involve the audience now. So the gentleman at the back there, we'll do maybe 2, 3, and then come back to the panel. So yes, sir, 1, 2, 3. Yes, sir. No, please sit down. Yes, you don't have to stand up. Just tell us your name and make your comments. Yes, you don't need to stand up.
I'm Mustafa Said. I want to take us back to a point where somebody made mention of NGOs being irrelevant if things were functioning. Now, I also don't like to see the issue of accountability being NGOized, if I can use that word. I want to see a situation whereby everyone in Nigeria has a business about public policy in Nigeria and accountability. Now, in that case, somebody just said that you can criticize the government, but make sure that you are doing something to grow the nation. And I started mentioning things like community service, but then I just remembered and added that you can, as a civil servant, you can just be a punctual, honest civil servant who is just nice to service users. Now, what I want to ask is that a lot of us, in terms of accountability, it seems like it is now the business of NGOs and young people like myself who, in the transition from graduating from the university to getting a job, they just demand for accountability. But it seems like the moment you get a job, go into civil service, you stop doing it. Only thing you can do is just be the nice civil servant. That is if you are very passionate. Now, is it that civil servants are not allowed to ask for accountability? If they are not, please, the convener of bribe code, I would want you to just say something about what we can do.
All right. Yes, sir. No, the man in front. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Olusegun Elemo. I just wanted to, and I'm happy that you mentioned about the foremost accountability institution in Nigeria, which is the Office of the Auditor General for the Federation. I think it will interest us in this room to also highlight that the legal backing for the Office of the Auditor General's work as at today is the 1956 Audit Act. It's obsolete. It cannot work for accountability. Now, Senator Goride was mentioning the Federal Service Audit Bill that was sent to the President on January 6th of 2019. The President requested for a review for 4 MDs. They sent a review in 48 hours. By January 9th, the reviews had gone into the presidential villa. As we speak today, we don't know what's happening to the Federal Audit Service Commission bill. Right. The Auditor General does not have the legal backing to do its work, so it cannot demand accountability. And without that, we're just wasting time.
Okay. Ma'am.
Good evening, all. My name is Halima Jubre. A lot has been said, but I want to take us back to the people in office. How did they get into the office? Because if you don't solve the baseline, like a foundation, you can never get it right. Strong institutions are made by strong people. And how do strong people get into office? You declare vacancy, people indicate interest, they apply, they go through processes, because what they will earn, everything is spelled out. And if they are comfortable, they take the job. And then the corruption reduces. And then since federal character came into being, please, I think it's time for federal character to be scrapped. Because if you do not scrap federal character, we will never have strong institutions in Nigeria.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Because people just get into offices without due processes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, some issues there. First, I think the young man who says, it seems as if the job of accountability has been left to people like you and young people who come out of uni, but once they have a bit of money in their pocket, they forget. So I guess it's a culture thing again. But I also, I will open it up to them, but there are 3 things. And the second is this issue of, structurally, do we actually have the right laws? Is the constitution that we currently operate and everything else, is that adequate? And I refer you, for example, to the fact that we saw a sitting governor stuffing money in his pocket. Yes. And yet we've been told he has total immunity, and that's why the case is not even being investigated. So we're not even saying he's guilty, but the process of even establishing that is apparently out of reach, right? And then the final points she made regarding what you said, political office, because sometimes when we talk about corruption, it's one of those chicken and egg situations where we are now. Now, how do we begin to sort of dig ourselves out? Must we do this overhaul that everybody says we must, or are there things that can be done? And then finally, if you could talk on the issue of the federal character and whether there's a role in this country for essentially what other people call affirmative action, and whether it's problematic. So maybe we'll start with you.
So I'm going to pick it from the angle of accountability being left as the responsibility of NGOs. And if you look at our approach, which is supposed to be, we are out to make both public institutions and public officials to be accountable. And perhaps one of the activities or our work that is out there is what we do under our tracker platform, where and it appears as if we are just after lawmakers only. But no, we are not after lawmakers. But why does it appear like we are after lawmakers? Because even when we look at the system, the way the democratic system is run, there are certain persons that were elected to represent the people. Yes, we can say everybody, the president, the state governors were elected to represent the people. But because of the complexity of the process, there is a provision for our constituents that is made up of this number of community. Can we put down a man or a woman that will go and speak for us where we can't speak for ourselves? And we are not just out to come and tell people what government is doing, but we are out calling on those people that are representing the people. Can you give an account back to your people? There has been a budgetary allocation for renovation of primary care center in a community that you represent, where children are dying day by day. Now, we heard that certain percentage of the budget has been released, and we are coming after you to say it is your responsibility to tell your people of a truth this money has been released, of a truth this is the stage of the project.
And if you kind of look at the total body of the work you've been doing from the time you've been established, what would you say are your successes? Have you been effective, do you think, in turning things around?
So yes, we will say success, yes, not at the pace it should be, but a bit of shift from what it used to be. And perhaps one of the ideal that we're looking forward to began to show of recent, where we have agencies of government like ICPC coming out to say, we recognize what you are doing. Platform like Tracker, like Code, like other people, we appreciate what you are doing. Can we collaborate and work together? And that's a big win for us.
So your work being amplified is actually one way in which maybe this issue can be tackled.
Can be, and also collaboration with agencies like government agencies that has the power to prosecute.
Okay. So Habiba, we were talking about that, but also structures, so constitution, the laws that exist. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I agree with her 100% about competitiveness. And I think that's one of the impacts from budget, the work of Budget and Tracker and so many other people. More people contested as candidates because of greater awareness. It's becoming more competitive. If we can make the processes of getting into office competitive as well, okay, that will dramatically improve the quality of people we have in leadership at all levels. The other thing about it is, when you're talking about federal character, if you are using the same competitive processes, you don't have to worry about federal character. It will actually be affirmative action.
Let me be a bit of a devil's advocate here. If really all we are is a capacity issue, how come the level of corruption in the private sector is as high as it is? Because the private sector tends to be a meritocracy where people get into the banks, because they know what they're doing. And yet these are the people that we're finding are actually sometimes, you know, collaborating with people in the public sector.
No, but what do you mean by the level of corruption in the private sector is the same as the public sector?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said it's very high.
It's very high. Okay. No, I know they're both high, but what I mean is, okay, government carries out its work through who? It's through the private sector. It can't carry its work without the private sector. The private sector are the ones that implement government's plans, and they set up their businesses, they invest, and they cannot do it if they don't get the bids from the government. Even well-deserved people can't do it. So you've got a broken system that both parties have to play at. But in the public sector, and I'm glad you talk about civil servants, there are a lot of very good civil servants. And they can actually hold themselves accountable within themselves. But when you got civil servants and public servants, public political office holders, right?
Who've been appointed.
Okay, who've been appointed. They use the accountability against each other, and there's lots of movement, no motion, or lots of motion, no movement. Okay? It's a real challenge. We need civil servants to step up and defend the citizens. We really do need some affirmative action in that area. I know please, I want you guys to interrogate, go and talk to them. They are suffering just like us. They are driving our bad roads. They are also dying in hospitals. Not all of them can fly their people to India. Yeah? So.
Okay, so, and Mr. Soji, I mean, because your work puts you squarely in the middle of reform for the private sector, and I know you've been doing this for many, many years. At least 10, if not more.
Almost 25.
Oh, wow, okay. Sorry. Because I first heard about your work about maybe 11 years ago, so forgive me. I didn't know it was that far back. So again, I asked that question because often when we have these conversations, it's almost, again, it's like a circular argument. What is it that is going to come first? Do we change how we think, our mentality, or are there things, specific things, like the bribe code suggested by him, which can make a difference if it is implemented, and who will implement it?
I think the first thing is we need a proper philosophy of regulation. Because the interface is not the whole of government, that's the interface with the private sector. The first interface is the regulatory agencies. And when your regulator doesn't really care how you make money, and when your customer doesn't come to you because you are professional, and when being professional and ethical is a nice to have, it's
but does it make a difference to your bottom line?
Yes, it does. For those who toe that line, they prosper. I can give you a whole list of companies that have set up in the last 25.
I keep doing this where you're talking. I am so
Yes.
sorry. We're going to have to take a quick break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Mr. Ababa, before the break, you were talking to us about the private sector and how good practices actually do make a difference.
Yes.
So why are we not seeing more and more people and businesses imbibe them?
I'm sure there are. We're so used in the media to talking about corruption rather than integrity. It might seem like...
But isn't that because there's a lot of it?
No, because,
I mean, the
because
estimate,
it's easier
no, but
to
let me
talk,
tell you,
yes.
20% of our GDP is
Yes.
said to be lost to corruption. That's a lot of money.
Agree.
More was stolen than we earned from oil. I don't know if you heard those statistics.
I
There's a
did.
reason the media is focusing.
I have read the high-level panel report. I've seen all they came back with. But the fact is that where you have a place that is totally bleak, saying that there's darkness is not profound. Talking about those who actually have a flicker of light makes more sense. And that's what we're now trying to do, to gather all those stories. Last Friday, we had 3 companies, one in technology, one in construction, and one in the medical sphere that have started their businesses from scratch within the last 20 to 26 years and have grown their businesses above 3 billion. There's even one that is a 72 billion.
Nigerian company.
Yes,
Okay.
by refusing. They refuse, as a matter of policy, a decision from the beginning. So they shun certain sectors. The construction company, for instance, did not work with government till government came to look for him only a couple of years ago, and based on the quality of his work.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to sort of see if we can agree here before we leave here what the things are that citizens can do within this bleak environment to actually begin to turn the tide. So we heard about the bribe code. How optimistic are you, for example, Mr. Nwokolo, that this is a law that you can get passed, given the issues we've said we have with the institutions that are supposed to be doing this?
If all your readers will go to www.bribecode.org and sign a petition to have it signed, it will be signed.
Right.
I believe that the examples you gave are wonderful, but these are exceptions to the rule. The truth of the matter is that in Nigeria, an ethical company is going to be extinct if it deals with government. But we want to get to a situation where corrupt companies will be extinct if they remain in government.
Okay.
And the only way to do that is to change the entire system so that the biosphere of Nigeria becomes an ethical system. Bribe code is the way.
Okay.
Right now, he talked about a law. Let me talk about this very quickly.
Very quickly, because
1956
we're
law.
running out of time.
We have, right now, the public sector is occupied by private servants, which means that we have vacancies in all our public services. So people who are supposed to do housekeeping in laws are busy looking at their own laws. People come into the office and the first laws they are bringing are private laws to benefit them and their cliques. That is a total vacancy in public service in Nigeria, because everybody who gets into office begins to serve himself and his family and his friends. The bribe code is the way to get out of it.
Okay, so we will try and see if a lot of people get that. What about from your perspective, especially as someone who's at the front line of fighting for accountability?
We won't stop talking about citizens, the need for citizens to get involved. Get involved. Governance is not far away. You are part of, citizens are part of government. Get involved. I mean, easy
So
example.
how, apart from sort of, you know, looking at the work that you do, how do people get involved?
I'm even looking at we that play in that field of accountability and transparency, supporting people actively to get involved. And I'm going to cite an example. Just this new government that is in power, we are already seeing some lawmakers, some public officials that are already misbehaving, not in terms of embezzling money. Can we empower the constituents of such a person to recall? There is a process to recall. When these people are dead, they are not there forever. There is a process. Can we support them to recall so that when others like them see that citizens, people are actually making use of this process, of this power that they have, they will sit up. It will begin to change little by little. Things will change.
Habiba?
I mean, the last thing I think is that there's a lot we can do. We can go to Tracker and find out the constituency project in our local government, in our ward. And the number of the lawmaker is there. You can call the person and say, what's going on? And then the next step is go to your local government chairman and say, please, I want to see the plans for my ward or my local government. How far? Write them a letter. Honestly, citizens don't engage with government at all. If you write a civil servant a letter, that letter you are going to receive a response.
Okay. I want to just quickly, I'll come back to you to round up, and I'll give all of you like a minute to finish up. But quickly from the audience, I'll take maybe, but literally I have 2 minutes. So it's half a second each. So I'll do the gentleman in glasses, the gentleman here in a cap, and the gentleman in blue. Oh, okay, the gentleman in front there, the two of you, quickly, very fast.
My name is Mukhtar. I'm from Connected Development. So I just want to respond to the question, to the statement she made mention of if you write a letter to these people, they will respond. We've sent, as an organization, we've sent over 2,000 FOI letters. What we get from this state, most of the states are the laws is not being domesticated. I don't know what's the meaning of that word, domesticated. And secondly, you send an FOI letter to an agency or something, they are bound by law to reply you in 7 days. But these people will call you for a meeting, not replying your message.
So let's have a quick conversation
my question is, yes, it's good for citizens to engage government. It's good for citizens to ask questions. But basically, we need to have that culture of asking more questions, not just questions.
Thank you. Please pass the mic very quickly. I'm running out of time. I'm going to have to close this quickly.
My name is Mazo Abubakar Sadiq. I'm from Connected Development. Actually, what I want to add is the issue of citizen engagement. Citizens need to engage from the beginning of the process. In the initiation of the budget process, citizens need to engage to see that citizen needs is being captured in that budget document. And for that purpose, citizens can follow up to ensure accountability on how that thing is being implemented.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Just quickly, my name is Austin Egbe from CDD. The truth of the matter is, let's focus on the 2 publics by Peter Eke. I mean, the civic culture and the primordial culture. The crisis of Nigeria is not that people are unable to engage, but there's what we call our thief. So accountability at the federal level isn't going to happen. See, we need to build a broad base at the local level that holds people accountable at the local level that builds up. You know the way we see Nigeria now?
We're saying we're focusing too much at the center.
Yes, because everything that is happening is at the federal level, including budget tracking.
Yes.
How many of us track state budget? None, most likely. So the thing is, we need to build people at the local level don't see the budget at the national level at theirs. Come on, go steal from the national and bring it to us. You are not a thief at that point. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, very quickly. My name is Abubakar Musa. I'm a pharmacist and a public procurement consultant. I want to just quickly focus on the issue of penalty. You made mention of at the beginning of the program the accountability index of different countries. Those on the high top, what are they doing differently in terms of penalty that we are not doing? I believe that our penalties are still not a strong deterrent.
All right,
That's why we're still having this issue. Thank you.
I've got 2 minutes, which means you guys have got like 30 seconds each, and we'll go this way, right? Quickly, for example, penalties. The Chinese are beginning to kill people for corruption. Should we be looking at those kind of things?
No, I think the main thing is the system. Even if the penalty is death, if the chance of being killed because my brother is head of state is very slim, I'll still do it. So the most important thing is the system. If you are guaranteed that you will be caught and tried and punished, that's more important.
Okay.
For me, it's an alignment of incentives. We have to use public policy to realign the incentives. You don't need to change the whole of government.
What does that mean?
What that means is, if you want to access help from the government and government says anti-corruption, show your credentials, show proof, and then you can get it. So everybody starts to align with what is required.
Yeah. Mine is competitiveness. You know, I participated in the last elections, and our own candidates had to write exams, go for interviews, do debates, okay? there should be competitiveness to access any public office. Even political office holders, when they are nominated, there should be more than one nominee and they should compete. Let us bring competitiveness and some sort of process into, and I think we'll see a difference.
And not to repeat what has been said, I will talk about the system, the institutions that we have in place. We need to, they need to come out and fulfill their functions and fulfill their responsibilities. We have national orientation agencies that should be doing most of what we are doing. We have, we have agencies of government, we have ICPC, we have EFCC, we have all of them that should hold public officials to account. They need to come out and do their responsibilities, fulfill their functions, and I believe we'll be able to move.
Well, thank you very much to my panelists. We have run out of time, and I'd like to also thank the MacArthur Foundation and also PLAC, who made this conversation possible. On behalf of Channels Television and Daria Media, I am Kadria Ahmed, wishing everyone a very good evening.